Hello friends, this is Yashwant Sinha. I'm giving you a talk on this particular topic, that is US renewable energy industry. Let's try to see what are the opportunities and what are the challenges with the renewable energy industry, and in terms of the US scenario, what needs to be done so that we are able to optimize this particular offerings that we have from the natural resources. The main idea that I want to introduce right now is fundamentally in nature. That is, why do we need to go in for the renewable energy right now? Can we really achieve 100% renewable energy in the power sector? And also, we'll try to answer this question as to, is it practically feasible to actually achieve 100% renewable energy for any particular country? So let's give it a go. The agenda for this particular talk is why renewable energy, opportunities with renewable energy, challenges with renewable energy, and we'll have a small discussion that you can actually think about. I will pose some questions to you and feel free to email me, or you can also kind of give some responses to that. Uh, let's try to see this particular figure. It's a cartoon that was published in one of the scholarly articles. So let's try to look at this particular picture in terms of environmental lens. And the idea over here is the boat will kind of resemble some of the energy requirements that we have, and few of the people who are kind of struggling with the kind of impacts of using traditional kind of energies, and some of the people who may not be currently experiencing directly some of the impacts of environmental issues. Possibly they may be impacted later on. If the water is too much, and the two people cannot get those water out of the boat, it is imperative that everyone will have to have the consequences felt at a later date. So it is important that we, as throughout the world, different countries actually kind of contribute to environmental issues, not locally, but on a global scale. And I think that then only we will be able to kind of meet some of the growing challenges. So let's try to see, why do we want to go in for the renewable energy, first of all. The Let's try to see this particular slide here, and this slide is built based on uh, some of the studies that have been done. Uh, if we look at the demand perspective from the energy side of it, uh, if we look at the conventional energy sources, we are expecting, for example, conventional energy sources means the nuclear, the coal, and the oil-based power stations and things like that. We are expecting that there would be a slight increase in the demand in the future as well. But installed capacity for renewable energy sources is expected to be much higher going forward. So the demand from renewable energy sources used for different power generation or for other kind of energy derivatives is going to be higher as compared to the conventional energy sources going forward. As a simple example, wind power is expected to increase more than 200%. Solar power is expected to increase more than 300%. Hydropower is also expected to be there, but obviously not significant amount. We know some limitations of hydropower because it can only be installed in certain places. So that's one of the key limitations of this hydropower. But wind and solar is expected to grow exponentially over the next few decades. However, the conventional energy sources are expected to grow as well, but not at that much rate. So this is one of the indicators that why renewable energy is going to be a deciding factor going forward. So this is the demand perspective. Let's try to look at the cost perspective. Now, over the number of years, we have been dealing with conventional energy sources, that is petroleum and other kind of conventional energy sources. We have seen that these power plants, whatever energy that they produce, that is electricity, for example, their prices tend to be increasing actually. So if we look at over the next 10 to 15 years or sometime higher, then as their resources kind of diminish or some amount of cutback is done on their utilizations in power generation, the cost of generating power is going to be higher. So that would put down more cost onto the consumers, raising the electricity bills. However, we have seen for the last 2 or 3 decades that the cost of wind power and solar power has steadily decreased. In fact, the wind power has decreased by as much as 70%, while the solar power decrease has been from 70 to 90%. It is expected that these will be in the future. So we will be getting renewable energy at a very, very competitive cost, as the conventional energy sources will come at a significant cost in the future. So renewable energy sources are going to dominate the market possibly later on. So what are some of the benefits of using different type of renewable energy sources? First and foremost benefit is the lower carbon emission. So I'm not talking about carbon emission during the manufacturing of wind turbines or solar PV cells or something like that. I'm just talking about during the generation of power, there is a lower amount of carbon emission than the thermal power plants. The other thing is perpetual energy sources. We know that all these renewable energy sources, whether it is sunlight, it is wind, or it is water flowing, these are perpetual in nature. That is, once the energy has been harnessed from these sources, it replenishes itself in time. So there is no net impact on the environment as well. The other advantage of using renewable energy sources is it's available across different terrains. We have sunlight available across all the terrains. Then we have the wind available across majority of the terrains. If we look at the map of wind speed distribution throughout the world, we can see that majority of the places across the world have wind speeds that are greater than 2.5 to 3 meters per second. This is the cut-in wind speed for wind turbines that is sufficient to drive the wind turbine and hence generate power. So majority of the places throughout the world have sufficient amount of wind wherein we can install wind turbines and generate electricity. So that's another benefit out of it. Likewise, majority of the places throughout the world have access to sunlight. So we can harness the solar energy and convert it into electricity as well. The other benefit of renewable energy, as you all might know it, is that there is no cost of the energy sources. That is, there is no cost of getting these particular sources from any source to this particular generation plant. So all that particular cost is saved. Apart from that, one of the benefits is like we already have technologies which are improving day by day in terms of the technology, in terms of the efficiency, in terms of the reliability of power generation. For example, wind turbines are there for the wind energy. We have solar PV for solar energy. We have generators for hydropower plants. Then we have wave converters. Then we have tidal converters that are used to generate energy from waves and tides respectively. So these are now the improvements made in the technology are now evident, and we are seeing much better technology to generate electricity. We are still not there, but obviously things are moving, and we will be having these kind of technologies at later date as well. However, there are some of the challenges with renewable energy sources. What are these challenges? Let's try to see this. First challenge with using renewable energy sources is that it has a lower calorific value. What it actually means is that when we talk about renewable energy sources, the amount of renewable energy sources that needs to be burned to or it can be converted into an equivalent form of energy that is produced by coal or petroleum, it is significantly high. As a result of which, we need much bigger areas over which these installations of wind turbines and solar panels needs to be done so that equivalent amount of kind of energy like power can be generated from these power plants. As a simple example, let's say if a coal or thermal power plant is spread over, let's say, 2 kilometers square, for example, an equivalent wind turbine let's say 1 gigawatt of thermal power plant is spread over 2 kilometers square area, then an equivalent 1 gigawatt would be spread over more than, let's say, 10 or 100 kilometers square of area for wind, and much more for the solar as well. So we require much more amount of things in terms of installations for the wind and the solar. So that's one of the disadvantages. The other disadvantage is the lower efficiency of our of our energy conversion machines. So for example, wind turbines, solar panels, these are not very efficient. Even though wind turbines are efficient around 45 to 50%, solar PVs are still in their 20s right now. So these are absolutely not very efficient. It actually means that if 100 joules of energy is coming from the sun, only 20 joules is being converted into your electricity. Likewise, if 100 joules of wind energy is taken in, then only 50 joules of electricity is produced as output of the electricity from the wind turbine. So it's a very lossy proposition. Because of this particular lower calorific value and lower efficiency, we need large amounts of areas dedicated to power production from these particular plants, and as a result of which, a lot of land can actually go towards the installation of these particular power plants, which may or may not be feasible in many parts of the world. Apart from that, there are some misconceptions in relation to the renewable energy sources as to how they are used and whether there is a conflict of interest, or there can be issues surrounding use of renewable energy. One of the incidences that recently come into the news was the death of whales because of installation of wind turbines. Obviously, there are no scientific rationale behind that. However, it raises questions, and those questions needs to be answered as soon as possible so that misinformation does not kind of spread. So let's kind of see the US scenario right now. What is the current scenario in the US, and why is it important? Or if we were to go into the renewable side of it, what will it take for the US to actually go into that particular area? So if you look at the first figure, that's the current scenario, that is the case for the US electricity market. If we look at the first figure, according to 2021 data, there is a significant amount of usage of petroleum. So majority of the power plants that we have is fossil fuels based. So petroleum, natural gas, coal are the major contributors of the power generation. But on the right hand side, if you also see that the cost of getting energy or electricity has been rising. It has been rising, and it has kind of become around 1.5 times the initial value of the first data that is there in 1990. So obviously, when the fossil fuel use needs to be controlled, the rising costs needs to be controlled, then obviously the option that we have at the moment is use of renewable energy sources. If we look at the case of US electricity market, many of the power plants are aging. So if you look at the coal power plants, 25% of the total capacity actually is contributed towards the power generation sector. Average age is around 40 years. Likewise, other power plants as well. So if we look at some of these, then the number of coal or thermal power plants are kind of decreasing in the US. Natural gas-based power generations are increasing, but obviously, as you can see towards the later end, the renewable energy side of it, percentage of that is kind of increasing in the US scenario. Obviously, again, as we talked before, that the use of renewable energy can actually meet the demand as well as a lower cost going forward. And that's one of the reasons why we are switching over to the renewable side of it. The other thing that we need to kind of identify from here is when petroleum and coal and other kind of power plants become of age, that is when they need to be decommissioned at that particular time, which particular power generation facility will actually take on the charge of supplying that much amount of power. Obviously, as many of the studies are showing that thermal power plants or nuclear power plants or petroleum power plants and things like that, they are not being very, very widely accepted as new power plants going in the future. So alternatively, we would be having more number of wind and solar power plants that will be installed in the future. And that would actually generate a lot of carry revenues, new job opportunities in the renewable energy sector, and many of the companies that were initially operating in the petroleum industry or coal industry, they are now going energy industry, that is even involved in the renewable energy side of it. So this particular sector is seeing to be growing quite a bit in the last decade or so. If we look at the case of your scenario from the electricity market perspective, we can see that the carbon emissions are high. And if we look at the total emissions, it is coming down a bit. It was high in the 2005s, but obviously because of different initiatives, it has been controlled a bit, obviously, but not significantly. So to control this, because electricity market is a major contributor of carbon emissions in the environment. To control this, if we are able to make use of large amounts of wind and solar installations, at least during the power generation phase of it, significantly low amount of carbon emissions are there, and as a result of which we will be able to kind of cut down on some of the carbon emissions. In terms of current scenario, transportation and power generation continues to be a major source of CO2 emissions. And when we are talking about newer transportation vehicles made of electricity, or more residential areas having electricity connections, and rural areas making more use of electricity for different kind of agriculture technologies that are being used, majority of these are now going to be electricity controlled. So when the electricity demand is going to increase, and fewer number of thermal power plants would be there, that would actually kind of result in very, very significantly spike in the cost of energy. To reduce this cost of energy and to improve the CO2 emission reductions, then we need to actually go in for newer plants which are made up of wind and solar energy. If we look at carbon dioxide emissions by different sectors, then we can see that the transportation sector, electricity generation, industrial, household, these are some of the key sectors that have a significant emission of CO2. In the last few years, there has been a reduction in the carbon emissions from the electricity sector, which has been primarily because of different initiatives that are being put into place. Transportation sector still continues to consistently maintain a high amount of CO2 emissions, and because of that, there is a requirement to actually kind of reduce those emissions as well. As the future cars are expected to be electric in nature, that objective will possibly be met. And that is one of the reasons why, because majority of the work that will be done in the future will be electricity based. As the demands increase, to reduce the carbon emissions, we would like to have renewable energy or any other alternative energy sources that will be used so that there is a reduction in CO2 emissions. So that's something that will be done in the future. Now let us try to see if renewable energy is actually a better option. Can we see if renewable energy can meet our expectations, and what are the financial implications of that? We'll try to explore that particular idea here. First of all, let us identify if renewable energy sources are indeed a suitable source to use. Now, some of the desirable features from an energy source that can be used for power generation include sustainability. That is, whether the source will be lasting forever or is it kind of controlled in a certain way. Reliability, availability, maintainability, cost effectiveness, environmental impact. So if we look at all these 6 factors, then renewable energy actually kind of tick marks majority of them, or to a very, very good approximation. When we talk about these renewable energy sources, we are essentially talking about right now about wind, solar, biomass, tidal and wave, hydropower, and geothermal energy sources. So if we look at these particular energy sources that are renewable in nature or perpetual in the origin, then they can be kind of useful, at least for the time being, to meet our energy demands. But if we want to look at a 100% renewable kind of a status for United States, for example, is it really feasible? So if we look at a residential, for example, solar panels like wind and things like that, we need to have a significant amount of investments made into the renewable energy sector, as well as many new wind and solar installations that needs to be coming up in the near future. The key areas in which US actually kind of invests, that is the renewable energy sector. It includes the residential rooftop solar panels, concentrated solar plants, onshore wind, offshore wind, and you have wave energy, geothermal energy, and so on and so forth. But majority of these relate to solar plants, and then you have onshore wind and offshore wind. So if we look at kind of these percentages and how much these percentages will be contributing towards 100% of renewables for the United States, even though they are generating lots of done, is significant. So for example, there can be billions and billions of dollars of investments that will need to be done in this particular sector if that was to happen. So some of the considerations that we need to take into account is right now, even though we have quite a number of technologies that are there, they are quite immature in the sense that the efficiencies are quite less. The space requirements is significant for installing renewable energy sources, based power plants. The natural resource requirements also needs to be taken care of. The waste management, the supply chain problems. So all of these kind of issues are currently there surrounding the renewable energy sector. So all of these sectors or these avenues needs to be looked into very carefully if we were planning to have a great increase in the percentage of renewable energy in the power generation sector. Apart from that, if we look at the skilled workforce, we are expecting more than 750,000 new jobs in the renewable energy sector in the US. If this was compared to 5 million jobs that this particular industry can provide in the future, that's a significant amount of employment opportunities as well. Uh, Based on those particular employment opportunities, there is a need for workforce training that can actually go about and train the people so that these particular people can go and work in these particular industries. However, saying that, if we have a look at the industry, there are very few training providers in these particular areas. So, to have people come and work for the renewable energy sector, there is a need to promote the renewable energy workforce development programs, and that will be essentially be enabling the one of the enablers for the renewable energy sector. So, what is the big question here? The big question right now is, do we really need to start using renewable energies on a very, very large scale? Do we actually kind of understand the real merits and limitations of these particular technologies? And however, even though it is the best that we have at this time, we should not be stopping, and the quest for new technologies should still be ongoing. There is a greater push to harness different type of marine energy sources. That is, we are concentrating our efforts not on the land but on the sea now, because there is so much amount of potential there. The wind speeds are higher. The solar energy is much more. That is the capturing efficiency. So the things can be much better if we try to expand our horizons around the marine side of it and try to gain some of the renewable energies sources and then convert those energies to the power sector. So that can be one of the ways in which we can move forward. Uh, I'll just post some few discussion questions here that can be useful for triggering some amount of your thought processes. We have kind of looked at the approximate cost of having 100% renewable energy. Can we identify strategies which would reduce this particular cost? Such cost reduction is going to be a major benefit for this industry. So I leave it to you to kind of talk about this. The other topic that I want you to kind of think about is energy saved is energy generated. Can we identify some measures that we can take to control energy usage and reduce energy wastage on the national level? So can we identify areas that have a lot of energy wastage associated with that, and as a result of which that will contribute to reducing our demand for power and reduce the carbon emission as a result of it as well. So I want you to think about these, and if you have any questions or any queries, feel free to email me. My email is y.sinha@outlook.com. More than happy to take any questions about renewable energy sector or carrier options about renewable energy sector and about the wind energy sector as well. So thank you. Have a nice day. Take care. Bye-bye.